Yeah, so my name's Jaron Reddy. I work for a company called ENTRNCE, and we sit in the Scope 2 space, or the 24/7 carbon-free energy space. And basically the reason why I just played that music, Fight the Power, we're kind of challenging the status quo a little bit. Because we believe that, regulatory frameworks, some of the reporting schemes, they are lagging a bit in the market, and I think there is quite, there's actual danger of, large corporates, large energy users choosing a scheme, and maybe just choosing a scheme, and maybe thinking they're ticking the box okay, but as regulatory frameworks change, they might be in danger of greenwashing. So I'm hopefully going to tell you a bit about that. I'm not sure if you recognize this picture here. It is in fact Radio Raheem. Before I started boring people about Scope 2 emissions, taking the stage at events like this, I used to be a hip-hop DJ. And one of the inspirations was a Spike Lee film called Do the Right Thing. And it has a bit of a parallel with what I am doing now, because I believe that just ticking the regulatory box, maybe through the greenhouse gas protocol or maybe another scheme, sometimes may not be enough, and I believe that we should all be doing the right thing. So that's kind of the little parallel there. Yeah, so as I said, ENTRNCE, we're based in Holland. I'm responsible for the UK market, and we're advising large corporates, large energy users, how they can actually make a difference in reducing their Scope 2 emissions. So yeah, the voluntary schemes out there, there's quite a few, and I would say it's a bit of a jungle out there, a bit of a jungle of acronyms. There's the IFRS, the International Financial Reporting Standards. There's the CDP. There's the Renewable Energy 100. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There's the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which is great, which was really popular as well, but there's faced scrutiny a short while ago. I think the CEO had the idea that Scope 3 emissions, carbon credits could be used for your Scope 3 emissions. I'm not really sure if that's a really good idea, considering the scope of Scope 3. We have the GRI. There's the most, the most popular one is probably the greenhouse gas protocol, which when you look at Scope 2, I guess they have two ways of reporting Scope 2. One is a locational approach, and the other one is a market-based approach when it comes to power. So the market-based looks at the energy you're procuring from your retailer, and the locational approach actually looks what's going on in the grid. We look at the locational approach probably a bit more than the market-based approach, and in fact we calculate carbon based on the fuel mix in the grid at any given time. So now, on a day-to-day, it's it's probably quite a clean grid, but when the sun isn't shining, the wind isn't blowing, obviously there's a lot of gas in the mix, so then the carbon intensity will be a lot higher. So yeah, I just go back to that. There's also one that's quite interesting. ISO, in fact, is developing a net zero standard as we speak. They'll probably come out end of next year, and they've looked at hourly matching as well. They're looking at hourly matching in a more granular approach of reporting on carbon, which is quite an interesting one to follow. Yeah, so what about regulations and greenwashing? Well, there's a green snail there, just to kind of depict that. Well, obviously regulatory frameworks, they always take a little bit of time to catch up. Looking at, well, let's start with Europe. Europe's doing quite some good things. If you look at hydrogen, hourly matching is already been implemented as regulations in Europe. So if you look at hydrogen, the way it's produced, that has those electrolyzers. If they're working, they have to be that electricity has to be hourly matched to prove the hydrogen is green. So that's quite an interesting development there. We expect the UK to follow suit because everything's connected. I think there was a call for evidence a year ago on hydrogen, on green hydrogen, and hourly matching was obviously discussed because the EU had already decided that. Looking at Britain, 2 years ago when we first started working in Britain, there was a call for evidence on transparency behind energy products. So instead of everybody saying, "Oh, we've slapped on a Rego on top of our on top of our energy consumption, and we're 100% green," the government was kind of debating that, which is quite interesting. And we thought, "Hey, wow, this was 3 years ago. We thought we're in. We're finally people are finally seeing that Scope 2 emissions isn't just ticking the box and isn't just saying, okay, I've bought a number of Regos and now I can claim zero Scope 2 emissions." Unfortunately, Putin invaded Ukraine at the time. That call for evidence just sat there, and it's still sitting there at this given time, which is a really real pity. And it's been quite difficult for us as well. France, it's quite an interesting one there, because France have, if you look at the Regos in the UK, they're handled annually. So if you so a Rego that is produced in the summer by a solar farm, a renewable energy certificate produced by a solar farm in the summer, that certificate can be used in the winter on a dark, wintry, wind-still night to greenify your energy consumption, which to me doesn't seem right. And the Rego system was invented 20 years ago, and I think at the time we had 2% renewables in the system. That's obviously gone up to, well, above 50 at times. So the tech to kind of look at Scope 2 a bit more granularly, the tech is there, and we feel that those regulatory frameworks should start to move, and we expect them to move as well, because I just mentioned the greenhouse gas protocol. They came out with their surveys at the end of last year for Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3. And the Scope 2, all of the webinars that were organised during the Scope 2 discussions, hourly matching was debated every single time. So we're expecting the greenhouse gas protocol also to move to a more temporal system than they've got in place now. I don't expect them to go to hourly matching, from annual matching to hourly matching in one go, but you might see them gradually move to maybe monthly administration of renewable energy. The states, the federal government in the United States under Biden, they have the ambition to have hourly matched renewable energy on 50% of the federal government's consumption by 2035. They're the biggest energy user in the state, so to come up with that ambition to have half of that hourly match, that's pretty decent, I think. Let me see if there's another. There's one more I'd like to mention. Ireland has now decided that data centers, that's legislation that's been approved. Data centers, their consumption of energy has to be hourly tracked. So it's quite interesting. There's a lot of movement going on. So how does that journey look? How does doing the right thing? How does that look? I mean, 100% carbon-free energy at every given time, every half hour. It's impossible. It doesn't work. It's not available in the market. The grid hasn't decarbonized far enough. But by setting that standard, you can kind of make informed, data-driven decisions on your energy consumption. So just taking you from left to right, if you look at, if I go here, on this side, you probably have just like corporates buying brown energy from the grid. They just want the lowest price. They don't care about decarbonization, and they just buy brown energy. I mean, there's only a few of them left, luckily. If you move one up, you probably have people on buying a green tariff contract. So basically, they're taking energy from the grid, they're buying a premium, they're paying a premium over that, and claiming that is 100% green energy. They're not looking at matching in certain time frames. It's just an annual contract, and they just slap on the Rego and say it's 100% green, which means they have zero Scope 2 emissions. To me, that seems a bit of a fudge, but anyway. The next step probably on that journey is corporate PPAs. I'm not sure, is anybody contemplating corporate PPAs here? Yeah. Anybody else? Well, that's one, not bad. So corporate PPAs, what everybody knows, you have a direct contract with the generator. But these contracts are usually long-term contracts over a 10-year period maybe. There's no real transparency to that contract. So you'll have a contract with a wind farm that will be producing energy, you'll be consuming energy, but there's no insights into how that really matches. All you're doing is you've got that contract for 10 years, the shortages in that contract and the surpluses, they're traded by the underlying retailer, and there's no real transparency of what's going on there. So I would say that corporate PPA system, it's a great first step, especially if you're adding new renewables to the system. You're adding, you have an additional element to that, so it's like a new build, then that's great. But if it's an old kind of wind farm and there's not a lot of additionality going on, what is your actual contribution to the energy transition? You're just kind of, you're just taking a bit of the pie, say. I think the next step to take is probably looking at those half-hourly time frames, and by doing so, you can kind of show when your energy consumption is actually matched to a renewable energy source. So you get like kind of your matching score, and that kind of says a bit more about your green credentials than just saying, oh, I've got a corporate PPA, I've ticked the box. Looking at the half-hourly transparency, what's good about doing that is you can kind of take informed decisions about adding other technologies. So maybe you have a wind PPA of a certain capacity, add some solar into that mix, maybe a storage unit, and then show how you're pushing out that grid energy, that's just that brown energy that's coming from the grid. Does this all make sense? Cool. And it says avoid greenwash scrutiny. I think that's an important one, because as I just explained, a lot of these schemes and a lot of these regulatory frameworks, they are kind of starting to debate, that transparency issue. It's gonna, just saying, you're paying a premium and you're not matching anything up, it just doesn't seem to be the right thing. And that is being heavily discussed by these schemes. So by doing that matching and making informed data-driven choices, you might avoid that greenwash scrutiny. So eventually, if you've done that analysis, if you want to push out that, what you call REGO top-up, if you want to push that REGO top-up, that brown energy that's just been greenified through certificates, if you want to push that out, you can start simulating that with our software. Sorry, but and you can push that out, and you can also minimize that REGO top-up. And the reason why that is important is that REGOs are becoming unaffordable. Last year, REGOs went up to 25 quid a megawatt hour, which is, that is really hefty. 10 years ago, they were down to 40p. So they've spiked, especially with the UK exiting the EU. GOOs from Europe, they don't count anymore. So the demand for British or UK REGOs have spiked, and that's why they've become hugely expensive and unaffordable. So eventually, if you start taking those measures, starting matching up, taking those data-driven decisions based on technology, you'll kind of minimize that top-up and eventually move towards that ultimate goal, 24/7 carbon-free energy. So this is an example of what we're doing with Oxford Brookes University. We just completed that project, which is really exciting for us. As I said, we're based in Holland. This is our first customer in the UK. We've pulled in all of their data and matched that up to their array of solar energy, and we're now advising them which choices they can take from a contracted perspective, but also from an on-site perspective on how to move out that grid energy. And that looks like this. The graphs, I've made them a bit transparent because this is actual data, for privacy reasons, but you can see top corner is just grey energy. So that's that brown energy coming from the grid. The one on the bottom, you can see how the solar is matching the consumption. So that's like really modest. The solar isn't really doing a lot. But from there, we start simulating the addition of wind power, biomass, and on the right bottom corner, we also add storage into that equation. And we can prove how the storage reacts to surpluses of energy by storing that renewable energy and using it in a later time frame. Yeah, and the reductions of that were massive. I mean, I think we went from a match of 8% to 80%, which has really reduced the amount of carbon that's being emitted by the university. So that's quite a cool project. Does anybody know what this is? I can't hear you, but I'm going to tell you. Yeah, so our mother company, Aliander, which is a regulated grid operator in Holland. Yeah, Holland. So I might be giving something away here. This is obviously an illegal cannabis farm, and in Holland, the grid operator is responsible for grid losses. So they have to procure energy from the market to compensate those grid losses. And illegal, well, you can imagine in Holland, illegal cannabis farms, they can be a bit of a thing. So they're quite a large chunk of those grid losses. And what they've done with the grid losses at Aliander, they used to just procure, like I just explained, they used to procure energy, slap on a REGO, or in Dutch it's called a GVO, and then claim that that procurement was actually green. What they've started doing now is they started doing that matching, that 24/7 matching. And what they've done in their annual report, they say they have a locational aspect of reporting on Scope 2 emissions. They have a market base because they have a retailer behind that procurement. They have a market-based report, and now they've added a 24/7 matching component to that annual report, which is quite cool. So I think they had a matching score 2 years ago of 58%. They've gone up to 61% this year, which is a slight improvement, but an improvement. And probably the ironic thing about that is that Dutch illegal cannabis farms, in fact, are using 24/7 hourly tracked renewable energy, which is a bit ironic, but anyway. So that's my presentation. If you're interested in having a chat with us, we're at a stand just behind here, B63, I think, and then we have a live demo. And if you're interested also in maybe having a look at your own energy supply, if you have rooftop solar available, we can do like a demo, and we could offer what we call a quick scan, and we'll do that. We'll do that for free. We'll just show you how your energy is actually half hourly matched up to renewable generation on site or through contracted energy. And that was my presentation. Thanks a lot. Bit weird this, but thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Jaron. I think we've got time for a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So there's the QR code for those that haven't submitted questions. I think it's a super important topic because clearly at Santander on the financing side,
I can't hear what you're saying, but I'm sure it's something about questions.
Banks are extremely nervous about greenwashing. So actually having the ability to align the REGOs or the GOOs as they used to be or in the EU is super important for finance. One of the questions we've got here, so would we really go to monthly grid factors over hourly? The benefit is surely to load shift dynamic loads and batteries to reduce brown energy generation.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, obviously I'd prefer to go to hourly, or I don't know who asked that question, but there you go. Yeah, I mean, I'd prefer to go to hourly straight away, but I just don't think regulatory frameworks will do that. It's a bit complicated, but I agree totally. And by analysing data as granularly as possible, those kind of concepts, load shifting, etc., become a lot easier and a lot clearer.
I think we're still looking for more questions to come through. Are there any more? Who took the photo of the roof? That was my question. But no, I didn't think.
It's my drone. No. But it's true though. They actually do. They do detect these these rooftops in the winter by launching drones. And there's another fun fact there. Then, because we come from the grid operator, they also try and electrocute the police officers as well by like putting electricity on the doorknob of these farms, which is a bit iffy. Well,
God. Yeah. Well, it's definitely very green.
Yes.
So
green. Yeah.
I think we'll probably, unless there's more questions on the Slido app, then I think we're good for this session. So thank you very much, Jaron.
Yeah.
Great presentation. And